The studio executive's note was handwritten in the margin of a test screening report, dated 1993. Audiences don't want this. Too dark. No heroes. Bury it. Below that, someone else had scribbled in different ink. They're not ready yet, but they will be. That second writer was right. But it would take a decade, the death of video stores and the rise of streaming darkness before audiences caught up to what a handful of 1990s filmmakers already understood. The thriller genre was dying, and it needed to be murdered. The 1990s inherited a problem from the 1980s, genre exhaustion. Action heroes had become cartoons. Cops always won. Villains always lose. Thrillers followed formulas so predictable that audiences could set their watches by plot beats. But a small group of directors, some established, some desperate, started making thrillers that violated every genre convention. No clear heroes, no happy endings, no moral certainty, just darkness, ambiguity, and characters so compromised they made audiences physically uncomfortable. Studios greenlit these projects thinking edgy meant profitable. They didn't realize these filmmakers were actually edgy, dangerous, uncompromising, willing to sacrifice commercial viability for artistic truth. The result, a decade of thrillers that terrified the very studios that commissioned them. Films deemed too dark to release, unmarketable, morally problematic. Movies that got buried, censored, dumped, or barely distributed. This is the story of the thrillers that broke the formula and nearly destroyed the careers of everyone who made them. Wyoming, 1992. Director John Dahl is shooting a neo-noir thriller with a brilliant hook. A drifter gets mistaken for a hitman, warns the target, and triggers a cascade of betrayals where everyone wants everyone else dead. Red Rock West should have been a catnip for studios. Nicolas Cage, mysterious small town, dark secrets, murder for hire, all the genre ingredients audiences supposedly loved. Instead, studio executives watched the rough cut and panicked. The problem wasn't the plot, it was the moral vacuum at its center. There are no heroes in Red Rock West. The sheriff is the villain. The wife is manipulative. The hitman is sympathetic. The protagonist is just trying to survive, morally compromised at every turn. Test audiences didn't know who to root for. They wanted clarity. They got chaos. Cage spent the shoot wandering Wyoming locations between takes, channeling genuine isolation into his character's confusion. He and Dahl held late-night script sessions where Cage questioned every line, pushing for authenticity over likability. Dennis Hopper, playing the real hitman who arrives to complete the job, brought his own volatility, clashing with Cage over scene dynamics, the two actors circling each other with genuine tension that bled into their performances. The studio's solution to their problem film, don't release it. Red Rock West got dumped into a handful of theaters with zero marketing, essentially buried. It played in San Francisco for a week, then disappeared. The studio considered it an embarrassing failure. Too dark, too ambiguous, too uncomfortable. Then something unexpected happened. Bill Pence, a San Francisco theater programmer, loved it so much he brought it back. Word of mouth spread. Critics discovered it. Suddenly, this unmarketable film was playing midnight shows to packed houses. By the time boutique distributors rescued it for wider release, Red Rock West had become legendary, not despite its darkness, but because of it. Audiences were ready for moral ambiguity. Studios just hadn't believed it yet. If moral ambiguity scared studios, outright nihilism would trigger full-scale panic. Arizona, 1997. Oliver Stone is making his darkest film, a neo-noir thriller where literally every character is corrupt, violent, or insane, and the desert becomes a physical manifestation of moral hell. U-Turn takes the noir formula and sets it on fire. Sean Penn plays Bobby Cooper, a gambler fleeing mobsters whose car breaks down in a small Arizona town populated entirely by lunatics. Jennifer Lopez plays Grace, who propositions him to murder her husband for insurance money. Nick Nolte plays that husband, simultaneously her victim and her abuser. Every character betrays every other character. Nobody tells the truth. The film spirals into violence so baroque and nihilistic that Stone's own studio questioned whether they'd made a terrible mistake. Penn prepared by living alone in small Arizona towns, refusing to socialize with the cast, isolating himself so completely that Stone said Penn would pace for hours before violent scenes, channeling genuine exhaustion and desperation. But the real chaos erupted between Lopez and Stone. Lopez clashed repeatedly with Stone over how he directed her character arguing on set that his approach felt exploitative. She demanded rewrites during intimate scenes, tensions escalating until she threatened to walk off entirely. These standoffs forced production delays and emergency negotiations. Stone eventually admitted her challenges sharpened the performance, but crew members remembered those battles as the most intense, uncomfortable moments of the shoot. When U-Turn screened for test audiences, the response was volatile. Some loved it, most hated it. The violence felt gratuitous, felt excessive. The nihilism felt irredeemable. Politicians in certain regions demanded bans. Critics split viciously, some calling it a masterpiece, others condemning it as morally bankrupt. Cable networks refused to air it for years. Rumors spread that graphic sequences got cut for overseas distribution. The film died theatrically, making just $6.7 million on a $19 million budget. But here's what nobody understood in 1997. Stone wasn't making entertainment. He was making a prophecy. U-Turn predicted the moral vacuum of prestige TV anti-heroes, the streaming era embrace of uncomfortable darkness, the audience appetite for nihilism that wouldn't fully emerge for another decade. It wasn't too dark for audiences. It was too early. If nihilism was too early, Texas, 1990. Dennis Hopper is directing a neo-noir soaked in sweat, pushing boundaries that would trigger censorship battles and make advertisers flee. The hotspot follows Harry Maddox, a drifter who takes a job at a used car lot in small-town Texas and immediately spots an opportunity. Rob the bank while the volunteer fire brigade, who also staff the bank, responds to a fire he'll set. The plan works until guilt forces him to rescue a trapped man, turning his anonymous crime into local gossip and pulling him into the dangerous orbits of two women, Gloria, Jennifer Connelly, an innocent caught in scandal, and Dolly, Virginia Madsen, the owner's wife whose pistol she keeps hidden. Hopper directed with the same volatility that defined his reputation, becoming fixated on Connelly's performance, discussing her presence more than the script, creating an uneasy energy on set. Don Johnson and Madsen clashed repeatedly during the film's erotic scenes. Hopper encouraged improvisation, pushing for whatever feels real, creating arguments over boundaries and motivation that cost entire shooting days. Crew members described the atmosphere as electrically uncomfortable. The tension between professionalism and exploitation, between art and exploitation, playing out in real time. When the hotspot opened, moral watchdogs condemned it immediately. Several theaters refused to screen it, labeling it indecent. Particularly Madsen's scenes, triggered campaigns from conservative groups demanding censorship. Critics split viciously. Some called it pulp trash. Others recognized Hopper's craft, using heat, confinement, and silence to build one of the era's most quietly intense noirs. The film died commercially, making barely $1.3 million. Hopper's reputation took another hit. The explicit content made it toxic for broadcast television for years. But later reevaluations recognized what Hopper understood. Noir isn't about plot. It's about entrapment. The heat, the sex, the claustrophobia weren't gratuitous. They were the point. The hotspot wasn't exploiting sexuality. It was showing how sexuality exploits, entraps, and destroys. That sophistication was invisible to 1990 audiences trained to see explicit content as automatically sensational. If sexuality triggered censorship, technology triggered prophecy. Los Angeles, 1995. Catherine Bigelow is making a science fiction noir about virtual reality, voyeurism, and police corruption, creating a film so prescient about technology's dangers that it would take 2 decades for culture to catch up. Strange Days unfolds in Los Angeles on New Year's Eve 1999, a city on the brink of riot, suffocating under corruption and technological addiction. Ralph Fiennes plays Lenny Nero, a former cop who sells illegal playback recordings, virtual memories that allow users to experience someone else's life directly from their brain. When a disc surfaces containing a brutal murder, Lenny becomes entangled in a conspiracy linking entertainment, politics, and the police force. His only ally is Mace, Angela Bassett, a bodyguard whose strength and moral clarity keep him alive as the city explodes. Bigelow shot it like urban warfare. Real nighttime chaos on downtown LA streets. Hundreds of extras, smoke, helicopters, practical effects creating genuine pandemonium. Bassett trained for months to perform her her own stunts, enduring brutal overnight shoots that left her physically exhausted and emotionally drained. But that exhaustion became the raw power her character demanded. Fiennes, known for refined stage work, struggled with the role's desperation until Bigelow insisted he abandon precision and embrace confusion, filming long takes that captured genuine fatigue and fear. But the film's most controversial element was its central device: POV sequences where viewers experience crimes through the perpetrator's eyes, including sexual assault. The technology wasn't just a plot device, it was a moral question. Does witnessing violence through the attacker's perspective make viewers complicit? Is virtual experience different from real trauma? Censorship battles erupted worldwide. Some territories demanded cuts. Others refused release entirely. Activist groups accused the film of glorifying violence and exploiting trauma for entertainment. The theatrical run collapsed under backlash, making just $8 million on a $42 million budget, a catastrophic failure that damaged Bigelow's career for years. But Strange Days wasn't exploiting technology's dangers. It was predicting them with terrifying accuracy. The film warned about surveillance culture, virtual addiction, police brutality captured on camera, and the voyeuristic consumption of others' trauma. In 1995, these seemed like science fiction paranoia. By 2015, with smartphones, social media, and viral violence videos, they were documentary reality. Strange Days failed because audiences weren't living in its world yet. 20 years later, they were drowning in it. If technology warnings failed, genre fusion confused everyone. Arkansas, 1992. Carl Franklin is directing his first major feature, a script studios had dismissed as too violent and too dark, and creating something that would redefine what thrillers could be. One false move begins like a standard crime chase. Three criminals commit brutal murders in Los Angeles, flee south with cocaine, heading toward the small town of Star City, Arkansas, where local sheriff Dale Hurricane Dixon sees the case as his chance to prove himself. But halfway through, the film pivots into something far more personal and devastating. Fantasia, one of the criminals, grew up in Star City. She shares a past with Dixon, including a son she never told him about. The chase becomes a reckoning with choices, secrets, and the weight of lives that intersected years before and are about to collide again. Billy Bob Thornton and Tom Epperson wrote the script knowing it would be hard to sell. It's too violent for drama, too character-driven for action, too intimate for a crime thriller. It doesn't fit any marketing category. Studios initially dismissed it. Franklin only got financing when he agreed to a minimal budget and no-name distribution. Cinda Williams prepared for Fantasia by spending time alone in rural Arkansas, absorbing the isolation and trauma her character carries. She later said she left the shoot feeling like she'd lived someone else's nightmare. Bill Paxton took the role of his career, arriving weeks early to study real small-town sheriffs, learning their rhythms, insecurities, and desperate need to matter. He treated Dixon not as a caricature, but as a man trying to live up to his own mythology. The ending, quiet, devastating, completely anticlimactic by action standards, stunned test audiences who expected explosions and heroism. The studio planned to dump it straight to video. Then, Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel saw it and championed it on their show, calling it one of the year's best films. Their praise alone gave One False Move a theatrical chance. It made just $1.5 million, but became one of the great surprises of the 1990s, a film that used crime as a framework to expose the fragile humanity beneath American heroism. Franklin had made a thriller that wasn't really a thriller. It was a tragedy disguised as genre entertainment. That sophistication was nearly its commercial death sentence. If genre confusion threatened one film, genre revolution saved another. Chicago, 1996. The Wachowskis, before The Matrix made them famous, are directing a mob thriller with a radical difference. The criminals are women, the romance is same-sex, and every genre convention gets dismantled and rebuilt. Bound follows Violet, girlfriend of mob money launderer Caesar, who starts an affair with Corky, the ex-con working next door. What begins as attraction becomes conspiracy when Violet decides she's done living under Caesar's control. Together, they plan to steal $2 million of mob cash and frame Caesar for the loss. The scheme is brilliantly executed until paranoia, greed, and sheer bad luck push everything toward disaster. The Wachowskis shot almost entirely in tight interiors, building claustrophobic tension and forcing viewers into the same confined psychological psychological space as the characters. Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly approached their roles with extraordinary preparation, working with intimacy choreographer Susie Bright to create a relationship that felt genuine rather than exploitative. They rehearsed not just dialogue but movement, building real trust off-screen so that every gesture feels charged with danger and affection. Joe Pantoliano, playing Caesar, took his character's unraveling to terrifying extremes, locking himself alone for hours before scenes to summon genuine paranoia. His improvised rants were so convincing that crew members sometimes forgot he was acting. But Bound's biggest challenge wasn't artistic, it was commercial. The explicit same-sex romance triggered immediate resistance. Advertisers refused to support it. Several theater chains declined to screen it. International distribution became a censorship nightmare, with some countries demanding cuts, others refusing release entirely. The film made just $3.8 million domestically on a $4.5 million budget, barely breaking even. But critics immediately recognized its intelligence and precision, a stylized noir that reimagined gender roles without losing suspense. It proved a low-budget thriller led by two women could outsmart the system and rewrite genre rules. Bound didn't just challenge sexuality norms, it weaponized them. The Wachowskis used audience discomfort with same-sex romance to heighten tension, making viewers question whether their unease came from the danger or the relationship itself. That sophistication influenced everything from Breaking Bad to Killing Eve, proof that genre revolution often begins with commercial failure. If sexuality revolutionized noir, domesticity weaponized horror. Seattle, 1992. Director Curtis Hanson is making a domestic thriller that violates the most sacred trust in human experience, motherhood, and creating controversy that would spark censorship battles worldwide. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle follows Claire Bartel, whose life unravels after she reports her obstetrician for sexual assault. The scandal drives him to suicide. His pregnant widow Peyton suffers a miscarriage. Destitute and vengeful, Peyton reinvents herself as a nanny, infiltrating Claire's home to execute slow, methodical revenge, secretly breastfeeding baby Joey to bond him to her, gaslighting Claire into appearing unstable, framing the mentally disabled handyman for molestation. The film's most controversial element, Peyton breastfeeding another woman's infant, triggered outrage that transcended typical thriller violence. This wasn't murder or assault. This was violation of maternal sanctity, weaponizing the most intimate maternal act. Rebecca De Mornay originally auditioned for Claire, while Annabella Sciorra tried for Peyton. The filmmakers switched roles after recognizing De Mornay's icy intensity perfectly suited the villain, a decision that transformed the film's energy from standard thriller to genuinely unsettling psychological warfare. De Mornay immersed herself so completely in Peyton's psyche that she often stayed in character between takes, making the set tense and co-stars visibly uncomfortable during violent sequences she performed with chilling commitment. Kevin Spacey nearly played the husband before Matt McCoy landed the role, a casting shift that kept the tone sympathetic rather than sinister. Had Spacey's darker energy dominated, the film might have lost its focus on maternal violation. When The Hand That Rocks the Cradle released, broadcasters worldwide censored the breastfeeding scenes over cultural taboos. Critics debated whether the film was exploiting maternal fears or legitimately exploring them. Then something unexpected happened. It became a massive commercial hit, grossing $140 million on an $11.9 million budget, proving audiences were hungry for domestic thrillers that weaponized intimacy rather than violence. The film succeeded not despite its controversial content, but because of it. Hanson understood that violation of trust is more terrifying than physical danger, a lesson that would define prestige thrillers for decades. If weaponizing domesticity shocked audiences, destroying the genre itself would baffle them. Los Angeles, 1998. The Coen brothers are making a detective film where the detective is stoned, the mystery doesn't matter, and the entire noir genre becomes an absurdist joke about confusion masquerading as investigation. The Big Lebowski takes every hard-boiled convention and sets it on fire. A case of mistaken identity, a missing person, a ransom, a briefcase, all the noir ingredients deployed to create a story about absolutely nothing, where the mystery is meaningless and the journey is everything. Jeff Bridges plays Jeffrey the Dude Lebowski, an unemployed bowler mistaken for a millionaire with the same name. After thugs ruin his rug demanding ransom ransom money, the dude seeks compensation, aided by Vietnam vet Walter, John Goodman, and Spacey Donnie, Steve Buscemi. The Coens originally offered the role to Mel Gibson, who didn't connect with the script's offbeat rhythm. Bridges instead created a character through ritual. Before every scene, he'd ask the Coens if the dude was stoned. They'd say yes. He'd rub his eyes bloodshot, achieving perfect glazed authenticity. On set, the Coens encouraged improvisation, keeping the tone as unpredictable as the dude himself. Goodman improvised human paraquat, an absurd herbicide reference that perfectly captured Walter's unhinged Vietnam vet bravado. With roughly 260 F-bombs, television edits became hilariously infamous, spawning the legendary censored line, "Do you see what happens when you find a stranger in the Alps?" A surreal phrase that became its own cult phenomenon. But when The Big Lebowski opened in 1998, critics and audiences were confused. Is it a comedy? A noir parody? A stoner film? A philosophical meditation on American masculinity? The answer, yes. All of it. None of it. The film made just $46 million on a $15 million budget. Respectable, but not the hit the Coens expected after Fargo's success. Then something remarkable happened. It became the most quoted, most re-watched, most obsessively studied cult film of its generation. Annual Lebowski fests, academic papers analyzing its philosophy, a religion, dudism, based on the dude's Zen acceptance. Because The Big Lebowski wasn't destroying the thriller genre, it was revealing that life itself doesn't follow thriller logic. Mysteries don't solve, quests don't matter. Confusion is the only honest response to existence. 1998 audiences wanted answers. The Coens gave them a rug that really tied the room together. And maybe that's the real story of every film on this list. So here's the pattern that connects every thriller on this list. They broke rules the 1990s wasn't ready to abandon. Red Rock West eliminated heroes when audiences needed them. U-Turn embraced nihilism when optimism was marketable. The hotspot weaponized sexuality when censorship was surging. Strange Days predicted technology's dangers when the internet seemed utopian. One False Move refused genre categories when marketing demanded them. Bound revolutionized gender roles when studios feared controversy. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle violated maternal trust when domesticity was sacred. The Big Lebowski destroyed detective logic when mysteries still needed solving. These weren't just dark thrillers. They were assassinations of genre itself. Filmmakers murdering conventions they'd inherited, clearing ground for something new. Studios greenlit them thinking edgy meant profitable. They didn't realize these directors meant it literally. They were making films with edges sharp enough to cut through audience expectations and commercial safety. The result, a decade of thrillers deemed too dark, too violent, too sexual, too confusing, too uncomfortable for release. Films that got buried, censored, or barely distributed. But time revealed the truth. They weren't failures. They were blueprints. Every prestige streaming series owes debts to these films. Breaking Bad's moral ambiguity came from Red Rock West. True Detective's nihilism came from U-Turn. Black Mirror's technology warnings came from Strange Days. Killing Eve's genre bending came from Bound. The 1990s rejected these thrillers. The 2010s became them. But here's the question that should haunt every thriller fan. Right now, in 2025, there's a streaming film or limited series that's too dark for theatrical release. A thriller so uncompromising, so uncomfortable, so ahead of its time that studios won't risk wide distribution. And in 2035, it will be considered a masterpiece. The pattern repeats. Every decade produces thrillers too dangerous for their moment, and every decade, those dangerous films become the blueprints for the next generation. Red Rock West was too dark in 1993. Today it's a template. Strange Days was too prophetic in 1995. Today it's a documentary. Bound was too revolutionary in 1996. Today it's required viewing. So which current too dark for theaters thriller will define the 2030s? Is it the true crime series studios are burying for legal reasons? Is it the technology horror that's too prescient for comfort? Is it the domestic thriller that violates taboos we're not ready to examine? When you encounter a thriller that makes you uncomfortable, that feels too dark, too violent, too uncompromising, ask yourself, am I watching a failure or am I watching a blueprint for cinema's future? Because the films that scare studios today become the formulas everyone copies tomorrow, and our discomfort is often the first sign of revolution. What current thriller feels too dark, but might be exactly what what cinema needs.